Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talk. Welcome back, Major General Prabdeep Singh, who's going to tell us what's happening with this Chinese peace plan. Why is Zelensky so interested in following the Chinese line as far as the peace proposal is concerned? And just to analyze with regards to Western support, I have reasons to believe that the support seems to be kind of fading a little bit. But let's see what the general has to say. Sir, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you very much to have me once again on the show. It's always a pleasure to be here. Uh, Ukraine is getting interesting by the day. We've had some interesting events which have taken place in the last week. We've had the visit of the Chinese uh, premier to Russia. We've had the visit of the Japanese prime minister to Ukraine and even down to Bucha. So then at the same time, we have had the drone incident in the past, and we have drone attacks which are taking place. We've had news that the United Kingdom is going to provide uh, depleted uranium ammunition, DU ammunition, anti-tank ammunition. So, and then of course we had that brush of a Russian aircraft with two B-52 bombers. So when you look at all this, the Ukraine is getting interesting by the day. Where are we headed? Will there be peace? Is I think most of the sane, intellectuals who are into this would want to see peace come by rather soon. China has taken the bold step, which they announced earlier that they would, they proposed a 12-point peace plan. Well, if you study the peace plan, it's absolutely generic.
Hmm.
It has no specifics in it. It is a peace plan because it is generic. Both sides, even the Russians are willing to consider, and so are the Ukrainians willing to talk because it's generic. And of course, the you have the West trying to put it down, saying that China has no locus standi as far as mediating is concerned in the Ukraine war, and the motives are different, which may be well be true. So, when I look at it, did we have a favorable outcome as far as the peace plan is concerned in this last 2 3 days of meeting between the two presidents? Well, I don't think there was something meaningful which came out about as far as the peace plan is concerned. At the same time, the objection of the United States, State Department saying that this kind of a peace plan is only just a farce, and it gives more of a, you know lead time or a pause to kind of regain and recoup the forces to the Russians. I don't think so. Any peace plan. I mean, let's take a peace plan which is there between when fighting is going on. What do you do? When two friends are fighting, or two, there's a fight in even there's a school brawl in a school. What do? First thing is you tell them stop fighting. That's the main thing that you do. You say you stop fighting, and then you separate the two. And then you say you both are not going to come near each other. There are many such examples which have taken place all over the world where ceasefire is a must, is a prerequisite to any discussion on a peace plan. So the objections of the Americans at the same time on this does not very it doesn't hold ground. To say that it is just to give time to the Russians to recoup and regain and train and re-strengthen and come back again. Well, I don't think. I think the Americans have become paranoid. as far as China and Russia getting together is concerned. Now, what about Ukraine? Do the Ukrainians really want peace?
Hmm.
We
That's a
know
big
for
question.
sure that we know for sure that even before the war actually started, Ukraine was in favor of talks.
Yeah.
It was only Boris Johnson who stepped in and said, "Sorry, you're not going to talk, and you must go to." I mean, there is no question of you guys having a kind of a discussion and discussing a buffer zone, creating a neutral country, and things like that. So, who's the one who actually got Ukraine into war? Primarily, it is, I would say, the UK, and then thereafter bolstered by the United States and NATO and stuff like that. So, Ukrainians were inclined from the very beginning. They were pushed to fight, and they have fought very bravely. And hats off to the soldiers
No doubt.
who have been continuously, launching attacks on the Russians at the local level. Losses worth 250,000 killed uh, is no joke. My sympathy goes on to the families of the soldiers who've died for a simple reason. This is a war which could have been avoided. If somebody is wanting to broker peace, whether it is China or whether it is any other country which is wanting to broker peace, I think we should give peace a chance. You know, there is a requirement for saner voices coming together and saying, let's stop fighting. Now, uh, let's see what's happening on Europe mainland, and let's see what's happening in back home in the United States.
Let's do that, sir. Interestingly, let's talk about the US first, as a matter of fact, before we get into Europe, sir. US, the establishment mouthpieces, New York Times, Washington Post, have started putting out certain articles hinting on the truth with regards to what's happening on the ground, especially in Bakhmut. There have been articles coming out, especially, it's not in the UK at least, but US, there are voices coming out and saying there are issues. Ron DeSantis has said, I refuse to support this. So, how do you see the US? Is there a shift in balance? Is there some different voices coming out? What's happening there?
Well, the United States and they set about, and the European countries, they set about imposing sanctions on Russia and economic sanctions. So and look at what is happening. It's the opposite what is happening. It's what they wanted to happen in Russia is happening to them.
Hmm.
You want to call it karma, or you want to call it stupidity, or you want to call it something which was unforeseen by the Americans. Now their banks are going down. I mean, the economy is absolutely in doldrums. They pushed in some gardeners $40+ billion into the war in Ukraine, while their own people are now suffering. We look at Germany, we look at even Italy, in France, and everywhere there are protests in Europe as well. So as far as the
Massive.
Americans are concerned, if I had to be on the American side, I would say so far so good. Ukraine, we are sorry, we are not there to help you, but we got to look after our own house as well, put our house in order. We've got China, which is a major cause of worry. I would rather spend money on taking on China, or at least defending myself, or my stated strategic goals uh, against China would be a greater priority. Now, I think that balance is gone. They put in the reserves, they have sent all the ammunition factories are kind of exhausted, the ammunition stocks are exhausted. And as I've always said, no country wants to give its first line ammunition, first line equipment into somebody else's battle. You got to defend yourself, you got to fight, and you will keep the best for yourself. You will only be able to support and give what you do not need. I think they have bitten more than they could chew, and there is a slight problem, and the Americans are definitely having a rethink. Now, how do they exit? How do they come out of this? Openly, they cannot, none of them are going to come up on media and say, thank you very much. We did Afghanistan, we stepped out. We did Iraq, we stepped out. Now we're going to step out of Ukraine midway. So they don't have the face to do it.
Yeah,
So,
offline being
but yeah, so at the same time, they must start giving feelers to the world that, we've kind of had enough, and soft pedal it through media reports, media leakages, trying to tell them. So it's all management. I would say information warfare at its best, and they're kind of making grounds to ensure that they may have to pull out or may not be able to assist or support the war in the manner they had earlier promised. And as we always discuss, it's all about economics. It's all about money. It's all about paisa. Whether it is the Americans or whether it's the Russians or whether I wouldn't say the Russians, I'd say the Chinese. So, same stuff is happening on Europe mainland. I mean, refugees. They have a huge influx of refugees coming in from Ukraine. Then they have the illegal migrants which are coming in from Africa. I mean, we do see reports of so many of them trying to get onto mainland Europe and getting drowned in the sea and stuff like that. You have an energy
sir.
crisis going on. What
Can
do you
I
do?
just request you? Mainland Europe, we got cut. So can you just repeat
Yeah,
yourself?
I said, as far as Europe is concerned, it's got its own problems. The refugee problem, the illegal migrant problem, the energy crisis, the food crisis. So, when all this is happening, I think every country has to start looking inwards. And other than supplying, giving, uh, participating, giving two tanks and giving four tanks or four aircraft, I don't think there is much that these people can do. So Ukraine actually is becoming a mess. We can keep talking about counteroffensives taking place and likely to take place. They say likely. When it will take place is not specified. So I think there is a slight problem whether it is Europe or whether it is the United States. And the beauty of the whole thing is the rest of the world is just watching. I mean, 70% of the world is watching the fun and saying, We've got nothing to do with it. You guys created this mess. Don't expect us to step in now to assist." That's what it is.
That is true, sir. But I keep thinking about this. For the Chinese, if you look at it, it's a lose-lose situation when they get into Ukraine. Reason is because of the war, his whole connect into Ukraine and stuff like that is gone. He has lost his investment as far as 68% of land that he had that's in doldrums right now. Let's say he starts negotiating. He will be basically negotiating between the West and Russia. He goes right, one of them is going to be unhappy. He goes wrong, both of them are going to be unhappy. He's, why is he putting himself to these kind of? I mean, it's a mess. Nobody wants to get into it.
Yeah, but you look at the Chinese ambitions. I mean, today China, the whole world is cursing China, other than the businessmen, right? Other than the businessmen, buying cheap goods from China, selling them in your country, make profit, damn good. Chinese stuff, damn good. Other than that, when it comes to politically, diplomatically, we have always seen that I would say 80% of the world does not favor China. I mean, they may have made a lot of investments in Africa. They're there and they're there since very, very long. But the moment you put troops to defend your investments in a third country, then there is a problem. And that is precisely what they do. They go to a nation, they take them, they start mining. Now, to protect the mines, they do not have locals. They bring in their own force, security force, which is actually part of the armed forces to defend, and they make a fortress around themselves, take out maximum minerals, and then vanish, and that gets transported back to mainland China, and that's about it. So the local economy really does not stand to gain.
Hmm.
The point I'm trying to make here is that China, though welcome, is not so welcome, right? Now, what is it wanting to achieve here? A, that look, America is not a superpower no more. I am the one you got to be talking about. I am the wise man here. I'm sorry to say, I should not comment, but when you look at the facial expression of President Xi Jinping, he appears to be absolutely wise, calm, expressionless, right? So what is he trying to portray? I'm the big brother here, and people should better start listening to me. Like Iran and Saudi Arabia listen to me, so the Ukrainians and the Russians must also listen to me. America, you stand at the side and watch. I'm taking over. That is the kind of impression that we are getting, and that is what they want to do. So, in the end of it all, what does he want? He wants peace in Ukraine so that his one belt, one road goes through, and there's free flow of trade between Europe and China, and that has to take place through Ukraine and through Russia.
Gee.
Now, the roads have to go through, the trains have to go through Siberia, and all that stuff. So, primarily, again, it's economics. They're not interested. They're not interested whether you're dying or
Yeah.
what. They're only interested where does my energy security. I mean, he's looking at energy security. He's looking at trade, and that's it.
Food from Ukraine.
Yes. So China getting into it, you have to look at it in a different manner.
Hmm.
But they've never brokered peace anywhere. Otherwise, I mean, just trying to get Saudi Arabia and Iran together is just one part of it. To get two rivals. And why are they together? Because they know if China is on their side, the it's all again about energy. So it's all again energy. It's all again about nothing else but paisa, nothing else but you know the uh, the economics part of it. And plus, they aim to be a superpower, the sole superpower by 2050 in all aspects. By 2035, they want to be recognized as the most important player in this world. So that is what they're aiming to do, and that is why they are stepping in.
Hmm.
They also are worried, if I may just say, that if they lose their foothold on the European economy and the American economy, their own economy is going to be jeopardized. You see, after all, the trade with Europe is huge. There is huge trade with Americans,
Yeah.
and if they are going to stop buying from them, from the Chinese, then
Again,
there's a huge problem for the Chinese economy. So it all revolves around that. That's what I take. That's my take on it.
absolutely correct, sir. So now let's talk about Ukraine for a minute. Why would Ukraine sit and accept this? Because it's got the Western support. Whatever said and done, money is pouring in. They've not really, uh, on the face of it, it doesn't seem like the casualties and this and that and the pressure that they're going through within the country with regards to the social structure of the country, they don't seem to have that much pressure. Why would they accept a Chinese proposal knowing fully well that the Chinese come as friends of Russia? Uh, does Zelensky has Zelensky started to see some sort of a reality that boss gravy train is now?
Yeah. Now he's also, after all, it's been a year plus. Hats off to him. He's braving it out. Is you know Into the valley of death came the 600, right? So he's actually throwing his troops into the valley of death,
Yeah,
and that burden that he has to carry of uh, defending Bakhmut just as on an ego trip is going to, it must be hurting him like hell. I doubt if he can sleep, because he's put so many families uh, have been destroyed. The country has been destroyed. At the end of it all, you have a conscience as well. So
yeah.
he's looking for a way out. And there's a little ray of hope that the Chinese give him. Let's face facts, he's a comedian, not a diplomat, not a politician, nor a military man.
Komediansky.
Yeah. So uh,
True.
the fact remains he's neither of the three, and he ain't a politician, he ain't a diplomat, and he ain't a military man. Now, he is also human, and I'm sure he's looking for a way out for his own country and for his own conscience. And that is what the Chinese give him, a little ray of hope that somebody, step in and let's stop this. Why get so many more people get killed? And that is where it stands. Then I think there's no other reason other than this, a little ray of hope of stopping the war on somebody's behest. And unfortunately, it is the West which is pushing him and pushing him and pushing him, and God knows where it's going to lead.
I have two more questions before we open out to the audience who can ask their questions. One, the first one says, when we talk about the West itself, sir, his narrative has been mostly driven from the US and the UK. That's pretty well known. And of course, I'd actually not say US, UK, I would say the neocon globalist agenda sort of a thing, which is it's this Ursula von der Leyen, Boris Johnson, it's the same guys who are all over the place. Uh, how do uh, suddenly the Zelensky regime, if I may call it, decides to negotiate? The impact on the West, on all these politicians, is going to be terrible because they will all lose their personal careers. And that to me seems a little bit of a stretch for them to kind of accept.
Yeah, you're very right, because all these people who've been pushing for the war, And they're pushing Zelensky into all this quagmire. They're actually responsible for the destruction of Ukraine and all the losses of life. And suddenly, if Ukraine decides unilaterally, without consulting them, thank you very much, I've had enough, I want peace.
Hmm.
Suddenly, you'll find these very people, their political careers are in doldrums. That, in my opinion, is but natural, and it's bound to happen sooner or later because the war cannot continue endlessly.
Hmm.
And if somebody thinks that keep getting people killed, well, not a good idea, and let's hope it doesn't happen that way. But what I take it in a different way. I look at this war as a game changer as far as the geopolitics of the entire world is concerned. Individual politics apart, you look at the geopolitics situation, which is going to change dramatically. Here we have, you have groupings, various groupings which are already there. We know of Quad, we know of AUKUS, we know of SCO, and we know of BRICS and stuff. So when you look at these groupings, there's total realignment which is taking place. Japan wants a place in the world once again. I mean, it's talking about building up its armed forces as a threat against China. So you have the old Japanese and Chinese, you know, animosity coming to fore once again. You have the West versus the Chinese. You have the Russians today, Russia plus China against the West. Uh, you have neutral countries, strategic, autonomous countries like India, still gauging, we're watching. So the politics is going to change. Russia's got a lot of influence in Africa. So has China got a lot of influence in Africa. Southeast Asia, the Americans, I mean, are going to have a lot of influence. So there is a massive shift as far as geopolitics is concerned. Ukraine is the one which is the tip, is the one which is uh, changing all this. So there's alignment and realignment taking place. There is Indo-Pacific. There is free, open Indo-Pacific being talked about by Japan. So individual careers apart, it has a major impact on the rest of the world. And the future of the United States dollar, the future of NATO, the future of the European economy, all this is getting affected. Whether China will become even more powerful after this, supposing they're able to broker the peace, or you just imagine what's going to happen in the eyes of the world. Big feather on their in the cap.
Hmm. That is there, sir.
So a lot of changes. Yeah.
The last one, and guys, after this, I'm going to switch over to your questions. So please start shooting up. There's some questions here. Please start putting in your questions so that we can actually discuss with. So the factor that so much blood has been spilled on the battlefield. You spoke about 250,000 casualties. That means about 600,000 people would also be injured. A lot of them would not be returning back to the battlefield. We are talking close to 1 million people directly impacted because of the war, dead or wounded. Uh, that's a figure which is unheard of in today's times post the Second World War. It's not something that we see happening on a regular basis. It's a very high casualty rate. I think the whole of Afghanistan would have had that much death. This is just in one year. When that kind of blood is spilled, so how do you sit on the battle on the table and talk about peace? It just seems a little fantastical.
I know. A, why did we let so much of blood being spilled on the streets? Why did we let so many lives getting lost? That's the first question. That is what people who pushed both the countries to war and did not see reason. They need to be asked that. And do you want to die till the last Ukrainian? I mean, making a statement like this also that we will fight if we have to fight till the last Ukrainian.
I know. I mean, how do
And
you say
who's
that in
making this?
public?
And who's making that statement? Not the Ukrainians. If President Zelensky had said, then I would have agreed. But then there are people who are responsible for this war. I mean, you can indict somebody for in the ICC for war crimes for kidnapping children, so to say. But what about those who actually pushed people into this battle? So, when so much of blood has been spilled, I do agree that what conscience will you sit on the table and negotiate at the expense of so many people? But now, but then are we looking at more casualties? The moment you use DU, depleted uranium, I mean, you know what happened in Iraq, right? Is the radioactive whatever it is radioactivity which is going to affect the mothers, the pregnant mothers, and it's going to be there in the soil and it's going to be affecting them sooner or later, and so many children will be born with birth defects and things like that. So I feel the sooner there are negotiations, the sooner there is end to war, the better it is for the
For everyone.
economy of the United States, for the economy of the Europeans, for the lives of the Ukrainians, for the lives of the Russians, and of course the last element of the peace plan, there is reconstruction benefits to the Chinese. So I mean, there needs to be sane voices who need to settle down and say thank you very much. Enough is enough.
Good job,
I
chalo
think
ghar jao. Hmm.
yeah.
That's, I mean, this on a psychological level confounds me, because with that kind of loss, one is bound to have uh, a setup in a place where somewhere down the line they could meet. When this kind of stuff happened in the Second World War, it was unconditional surrender. And that's what brought the war to an end. And that's what confounds me, that whoever stops right now, sir, is going to have some regrets, and those regrets will turn out into another war 5, 6, 7 years down the line. These kind of
Oh,
situations, I mean, and Europe is famous for it. So
are we looking at another Hiroshima Nagasaki to stop the war? Are we waiting for that? I mean, if we are not going to sit down and talk, is it are we waiting for something like that, such a massive catastrophe to happen that we are forced to sit and talk and say thank you very much, no more, no more? I think the rhetoric uh, being created by the Americans is not fair as far as this is concerned. There
absolutely.
need there needs to be a talk. The United Nations seems to have faded away into oblivion. The fact of the matter remains that out of the P5, it is three versus two, right? Between the P5, the permanent five, of the Security Council, it's a three versus two, and the two combined together are quite potent and dangerous. So the United Nations, the Security Council, I mean, I don't know what's happened there or what's happening. There is a definite need for realignment. There is a definite need for reorganization if this be the case.
It's terrible. I mean,
Yeah. So if the United Nations is not going to broker peace, if the Americans are not ready for to allow peace, if the Chinese are wanting to broker peace, Russians are not wanting to fight beyond a point, or were not even wanting to fight initially, and so were the Ukrainians not wanting to fight. We've created a fight, and now nobody wants to come in and step in. I mean, how long will it carry on? High time we stopped, I guess.
I know, sir. I know. It's just a sad sort of a scenario because it's a waste of pretty good land. I mean, it produces a lot of wheat. A lot of people are
No,
hungry around the world.
not only land, the lives.
Yeah,
So many people, homes destroyed.
it's terrible.
Yeah.
Guys, like this video, subscribe to the channel, please. Let's get into the questions so that we can see what you guys have to say about what we're talking about. Hardik had said, sir, how does attrition in Bakhmut compare to the Battle of Verdun in terms of manpower, casualty per day levels of logistics? Let's leave the First World War away, sir. But in modern warfare capabilities, how do you assess the attrition in terms of the Battle of Bakhmut?
Well, you know, in modern day battles and modern day warfare, battles of attrition are not talked about. They are considered ancient, and maneuver warfare is what we look at.
Hmm.
And if you're not into maneuver warfare and you're going into attrition warfare, you'll have casualties. That's why maneuver warfare is what modern warfare is all about. Whether it is maneuver warfare, it's a combination of air, land, sea resources. It's all about uh, strategic moves. It's all about not this kind of a war. And unfortunately, in Europe, if you have a war breaking out, this is the kind of war which is to be fought because of the lay of the ground.
That's how
But
Europe is.
yeah, that's what Europe is. So it's not a good idea as a soldier. Trust me, defending a what do you call a town, you can't is easier than capturing it. So what do? We cut off all routes of ingress and egress. We make sure nobody comes in and nobody goes out, and then we go to the next place.
Grind it down.
We kind of choke that place and go to the next place. That's how you capture territory, and you allow that place to kind of okay, you keep shelling it and you let it be, but you do not allow anybody to get in and get out. And then
Hmm.
you look at the next town, which is, and you maneuver from the side and you go ahead, bypass this, or leave your elements here and go ahead. So we have different, terminologies, masking. We call them isolation and investment. So first you isolate the place, then you invest that place. I mean, you choke that place from all sides, and at the same time, there are forces which are moving ahead. So this kind of a maneuver warfare doesn't seem to have, been displayed here. So
Hmm.
attrition is not a good idea. Banging your head against a well fortified enemy, not a good idea.
Would you say that for the Russians or you'd say that for the Ukrainians, sir? Or both?
I, I would say for both. They've pumped in so many troops into Bakhmut unnecessarily, not required. hold that much, put in, keep only that many forces which can hold on to the Russians who are trying to capture. That's it.
As a matter of fact, last time you told us that the
You
entire Ukrainian army is being held up by,
just one.
you know,
About
the
20, 30.
Wagner.
Yeah. So the Russians should have been moving ahead. I don't know what they're doing there.
A lot of people attribute it
You,
to the mud, so they're saying that it's very and that, I mean, to an extent, with the videos coming out, it seems quite terrible actually. 8-10 meters of that dark mud. A lot
yeah,
of people say that it's
I
not easy to move in that place. That's why they're saying, okay, let the ground kind of dry up, then we'll go.
yeah, maybe because of the black soil there, and which is apparently about 3, 4 feet. It's quite soft. But then there are ways and means to, uh, well, we have our ways and means to go ahead, and the stuff is brought from Russians only. So they should have actually been using what they're supposed to use.
Yeah. Oh, Indian Army, of course, no questions. So Akash says, are there parallels between fortifications of Donbass to the Maginot Line? Is it tougher to capture Donbass as it was the most industrialized in the USSR? Is that why it's taking so long for the Russian armed forces to capture it? Additionally, sir, is there a line that you see the Ukrainians building up as a further defensive from this north-south line from, let's say, Kremenaya downwards to Bakhmut? You've got this Avdiivka and right down to Vugledar. That line is there. But if this thing cracks, do you see them building any other lines anywhere else?
You see, that is where they've gone wrong. There are no, I don't see a pattern which is really emerging. They have their entire defensive lines based on towns and villages, and they have left gaps because of perhaps the mud part of it.
Yeah.
But in a built-up area, what do you need? You just have to. I mean, all those who watched movies would realize how easy it is to defend in a built-up area, and how difficult it is to capture a built-up area. So this kind of uh, wherever there is dense population, wherever there is density of buildings, obviously it is difficult. It is difficult to go ahead. So this is actually connected to the last question also. There's no Maginot Line and all that. They were they were proper defensive lines.
Fortifications.
There were fortifications built. They were not this way. If you recollect, there was this picture which came and said the Russians are fighting with shovels. You remember that one?
Yeah.
No, I just want to make something clear. Every infantry soldier carries a
Shovel.
shovel. Okay, so he's not fighting with shovels. That is a part of his equipment.
Yeah.
That
Especially in
if
a
he
muddy
needs
area,
to,
what else will you do, sir?
no, he has to dig down. When he has to dig down, he needs that shovel to dig down. Of course, you can cook on that also. That's a different story.
The shovel thing is too funny, sir. For everything that is shot down, the Russians put out a photograph of that with a Russian shovel inside it. And it's just even the drone. So they had a shovel going and hitting it, and the drone falling off. So it's. I mean, the propaganda has just been too amazing
Oh,
in
the
this.
information warfare, I think it's at its best.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and now the Russians have caught up. So it's actually a equal battle, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So aren't the Russians' red lines being breached? NATO is providing Ukraine with ISR, ammo, tanks, fighter jets, Blackwater troops, Navy SEALs in foreign region. How and now depleted uranium. Where is the nuclear threshold?
A very good question. Now, I'll just take your mind to what was talked about between the two leaders of China and Russia. There's this statement that there will be no nuclear war. They made it very, very clear because everybody understands the horrors of a nuclear war.
Mm.
And we discussed in one of the shows talks earlier. We talked about tactical nuclear weapons. Well, tactical nuclear weapons, I mean, could be used, but in all probability will not be used because the repercussions are far too many. And what is the Russian threshold? Well, not an inch of Russian soil, actual Russian soil has been lost. So if the battle gets into the Russian soil, now we're looking at the Ukrainian soil, which is today claimed by Russia. But when it comes to the actual Russian soil, well, that would be the threshold, in my opinion.
Mm.
Right now, the battle zone is Ukraine, and it is a battle for Russia claiming uh, Russian territory, which they claim. I mean, let's face facts that
Correct,
they're
sir.
talking about Russian-speaking areas, and but the moment the war is spilled onto their own soil, well, that's the threshold.
I think like I don't know, but it just seems like the Russians are trying to edge in Crimea as the red line.
Yeah, that of course,
Don't do that.
Crimea, but it's not going to happen. No, you need a solid force to do that, and Ukraine, my friend, cannot do it on its own.
Yeah, I mean, what I the other day when that drone attack happened in Crimea, I mean, I kind of lost a heartbeat. I said, "Oh, Sevastopol is not something that the Russians would tolerate, and they're pretty brazen about it." So that was a little scary to me. I've not been scared in this war except for that one moment
You see,
because
that's
the
fine.
Russians have very serious connections psychologically with Crimea, sir.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That as far as Crimea is concerned, whatever happens in Crimea, the statement that we will recover Crimea and things like and reclaim it. Well, it's not going to happen by the Ukrainians themselves. So, if it's not going to happen by the Ukrainians themselves, with all the support they may get, as far as logistic support is concerned, or even military wherewithal is concerned, they on their own cannot do it. And if somebody else gets involved, then obviously it's a red line.
It's a red line. The West wants to keep bleeding Russia using disposable Ukraine as the cannon fodder. It's estimated it'll take 400 to 500 billion dollars to rebuild Ukraine, which it won't get after the war ends.
$411 billion is the correct figure which has been quoted by the World Bank, and that will be required to reconstruct and rebuild Ukraine after the war. That is in the current state. Now, what is very interesting is that about $300 billion has already been frozen as far as
The Russian this
the
thing.
Russian money is concerned, which is there in Europe and US. So they're talking about 330, I think 330 billion already available to them.
Yeah,
And as far as Russia, it is said that Russia can easily absorb this kind of loss. I mean, it is something that they can absorb. So 330 already available, 411 required. Also about 81, which is to be pulled in by the others.
hmm.
81 billion. You know, so which is they say is doable, which can be donated and things like that from by other countries. So let's see. And the question is, who is going to rebuild Ukraine? Is it the Chinese or whether it is the West?
I think it's the Europeans that are going to pay the Chinese to build it, nothing else. If I know,
Well, that means, well, so
if I know Ursula von der
the
Leyen and the European parliamentarians, they're going to pay the Chinese to build it. Nothing else.
yeah, so so it is ultimately who stands to gain? It is the Chinese who stand to gain,
And you never know, the
and
Chinese will take the raw materials from Russia, and Russia is also earning money there.
so at the end of it all, it's all about
Yes,
it's economics.
indeed, indeed, sir. This is a pretty wild question, but I'm going to take it up. Asa, I saw some Russian news. They keep three parts of this. Bear with me. They keep saying that the war was unprovoked, provoked by the Anglo-Saxons. There's a lot of anger against them in Russia. Do you think after this depleted uranium saga, Russia will directly try and target the UK? As hurting the UK has sentimental values as well in the West. Hurting UK will also hurt USA. Do you think they will target them? Maybe militarily, of course, difficult, but non-militarily, sir.
You see, they made a statement. The statement has been made by the president, by Putin, saying that they will have to pay a heavy price if this depleted uranium, and it has a nuclear tinge to it, and it so there is a kind of a threat which has already been given to to UK. Will it attack UK? I have my doubts because they will not want the war to spill. As I've always said, the war will always remain contained in the boundaries of Ukraine. That's the battle zone. That is the battlefield area. That is where the boundary lies. Any spillover of the war towards the east or towards the west will have greater ramifications, and which way the war will lead is something that we really cannot guess at the moment, if I may just put it this way. It
That's
has to
a
remain contained in that battle zone.
that's a scary scenario, sir. If I may.
Absolutely.
Assuming ceasefire is achieved in Ukraine, can the West turn to China, or will they have to divide attention between China and the remaining worry of the Russian next move? If latter, can West pull it off?
Assuming ceasefire is achieved in Ukraine, can the West turn to China, or will they have to divide attention between China and the remaining? Yeah, actually, the West, when you say China, let's not talk West, let's talk America, right? So there's a slight difference you'll have to make. Assuming there's a ceasefire, and as far as the Europe is, European nations are concerned, less the United States, their attention will continue to remain towards Ukraine and the Russians as to what move next move the Russia may make, which it may make after 4, 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, their next Crimea in 2014, and
Yeah,
today it is 2022, 23. So it's only after 8 years that you know, this kind of an aggressive action took place. So yes, Europe will remain wary of Russia. America, in any case, while it is supporting materially and I would say cheering up from the sidelines, America's worry remains China and is focused towards China, and it will continue to remain focused towards China. And the West, the best way they would do is bolster up the NATO forces, reorganize NATO with better equipped and better trained soldiers, maybe station some of their soldiers in Europe once again, closer to Russia, towards the east. However, their attention will continue to remain towards China. I mean, American cannot ignore China. Taiwan remains a major source of concern, always and at the moment.
Absolutely. John says it is easy politically for the West to support this conflict because no body bags come home. The cost is all just a means to an end, weakening Russia before ganging up on China.
Yeah, it's good to hear from you, John. Yeah, that's what they don't want body bags. I mean, if you recollect, there was a statement by President Zelensky saying that the American soldiers will also soon have to fight here. Well, that's not happening, and the American people have already come to a conclusion that they are not going to fight other people's battles with
Yeah.
physically. So that is a realization which has already taken place. I mean, so there are no body bags coming back from any battlefield, right? The overall aim, as you specified, is to weaken Russia because the sudden, they thought Russia after the collapse of Russia in 91, they felt that the Russians were gone of the USSR in 91. They felt that Russia was gone. I mean, but with whatever we have seen, Russia came back and today is a force to reckon with. So the aim is to weaken Russia so that they can focus on China, and I think that statement is absolutely correct.
So he was asking the same question. I think you've answered that, sir. How much of a reduction of arms has caused to the Russian forces and weakened the Russians? Do you think Russia could withstand another war, supposedly from Poland? That's interesting because the Polish have become really aggressive in the past month or so.
Yeah, Poland has become aggressive. It supplied most of its armed forces to equipment to the Ukrainians,
Mhm.
and half of it, I'm sure, has already been destroyed. And you must understand why is Poland so bold in making statements. You know, that's the country which is supported totally by the Americans as far as NATO forces are concerned. If you study the NATO organization, the only battle group the which is mentored by Americans is Poland. The rest of them are either French, Italian, or German. So the Poland is bold because they have got Americans on their soil. They've got Americans on their soil for a very long time. They've been training with them. They've got their equipment. There is a lot of cross-functional, activity which takes place between the two armed forces. So that is how Poland is emboldened, if I may just put it. As far as the Russians are concerned, obviously they have suffered a lot of losses. I mean, in the initial phase, they've had huge losses. And when it comes to a second war coming about after Ukraine and Poland, say it happens, well, the Russians will definitely want time to regroup, regain their forces, retrain, re-equip, reorganize. So the Russian definitely would need a couple of years, so 3 to 4, 5 years, to rebuild their forces if they have to fight. And if it comes earlier than that, well, definitely Russians are in trouble.
Indeed, sir. Isn't China backed by some financial interests which support Ukraine? So the globalization continues and the China US G2 thrives. And together they can call all the shots.
Interesting one, wild but interesting.
You never know,
If
sir.
I may just put it, they're still calling the shots.
Yeah,
One
they
from
are.
the east and one from the west. They are calling the shots, and it's all financial, economic interests, which are, you know, the American interest is what? The defense industry, the energy, the oil industry, the defense industry. Chinese interests are what? All about energy and
Right.
food and the supply chains. So it's all economics. At the moment, I would not say that China's, the defense industry is going to get bolstered because of this. No, but definitely the American wars are all based on these on defense industries.
Absolutely, sir. We'll take just a couple of more questions, sir. We're closing into an hour. So, sir, do you think China will come out of this as a winner post the war in the world standing?
If it is able to broker the peace, yes. If it
That's
is unable to broker peace, then it loses face. Yep.
hmm. Has the Russian general winter helped Putin in any way?
The Russians are quite used to the winters, and thanks to climate change and all that, the winters are getting shorter by the day, by the year, and definitely the I would say the Ukrainians and the Russians both are used to the winter, and I don't think the momentum was much lost as far in this particular winters. And in the days to come, yes, with the thawing of the snow, the mud is wet. It is only once the thawing stops and the grounds get a little hard, will we see a renewed, I mean, push or more offensives coming about. So it's another 2 3 months to see.
We have some time to calm down,
Yeah.
and we'll take this as a last one. So this is an interesting one. What has he told Putin before departure? It's going to happen, which has not been done in the past 100 years.
Well, I really don't know what has he told him, and what does he mean by that? And I mean, I would want to know what is he wanting to say or what he said. Obviously, when two countries, two nations, powerful nations get together and gang up against a mighty unipolar American, you know, force or as America as a nation. Now imagine Russia and China ganging up together against America. And if they are going to be friends as they claim to be, and they continue to strengthen their relationship to a level that they will pose a massive threat to the Americans. So that is what he's perhaps hinting at, that together we can sort out America.
100-year hegemony, as it's called.
Yeah. So that is what perhaps is what is meant by this. And let's face facts. It is actually a dangerous situation. If you look at it, it's a dangerous situation. It is not very favorable to the rest of the world.
Exactly.
Not in the Indo-Pacific, not in the Arctic, and not for India as well, I would say.
Absolutely. On a lighter note, sir, this is an interesting comment. I'll just take this up. इस चैनल में बहुत सारे जनरल आते हैं, पर आपकी जनरल नॉलेज बहुत ज़्यादा डीप है. Uh, ये जनरल खतरनाक है. इंडिया इज इन सेफ हैंड्स. भारत माता की जय.
Who is this guy? Thanks, Pratik, for whatever you've said. Uh,
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, khatarnak.
I must say, thank you so much. You've brought about a very different perspective on the Ukraine war, because the kind of rhetoric that we hear on our TVs are. Uh, I don't watch it, but I read these articles coming out of the West, especially, and you wonder whether this guy's was, or I mean, let me rephrase: what were they smoking when they were writing this article? Because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. From being Bakhmut being the the pinpoint of the Ukrainian defense line to just another small little town today. The rhetoric changes, and it's just crazy. But bringing some sense into it, of course, requires a lot of effort from your side. Thank you so much for that. It's always interesting talking to you and learning a different angle and a realistic angle from you.
My last comment I would like to make, Adi,
Haji.
is uh, there there is a lot of talk and lot of in these writings which is coming about and a lot of talk. Uh, it talks absolutely anti-China, anti-Russia. I mean, from the West, when you hear them, it's they barring two, three sane voices.
Yeah,
Uh, the rest of the people are just. I've lived in the U.S. and I was there during 9/11, and I worked with the United Nations at that time. Trust you me, the common man spoke exactly what their president said. There was never a different viewpoint. The same viewpoint which came from White House was the viewpoint which was, talked about on their media, and that is that same language is what the common man spoke. There is lack of independent thinking. There is a narrative which is spelled out, and that narrative is pushed through a lot of these people who write what is being asked to write. While we may say press is independent and things like that, uh, well, I have my doubts on that score. Not very independent. Even if it is independent, the minds are not independent, is what I may
yeah,
say.
yeah. I think that's a very important point. So funnily speaking, the narratives have been driven on sheer, sometimes just sheer lies, and that's what I think is making, and that's another outcome of this war. So that the press believers have kind of lost. People don't believe it anymore. From the ghost of Kiev to Bukcha to I don't know what all, they have just lost the plot completely, and one doesn't make sense of it anymore. That this is the same press that literally wants to survive in the world by saying that we are the keepers of the truth or whatever it is, because on one end they say something and the second day they'll say something else. It's just terrible, actually.
That's true.
And sadly speaking, a lot of Indian press, and that's my last thing I would like to say, is has picked up squarely on the Western media. And some people, I don't want to get into who and all that stuff. It's squarely on what the West says. They pick it up, put it in the news. It's always what Zelensky is doing. It's never what about the Russians side. What are they saying? No, but it's the way they want us to believe a war. एक ही तरफ लड़ रहा है, बाकी तो I mean, he's just fighting animals on the other side. It's terrible, actually.
I don't remember when I watched television last.
Yeah, I don't have one, so
I don't have one in my room. I watch a movie, all right, but I do not have any of those news channels coming up on my TV.
I don't have one, so I just don't have one. But sometimes sadly you get these clips on YouTube. You end up clicking on them and you listen to it. Sir, thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking and learning from you. Till next time, sir.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you very much. And thanks to the viewers for your support. It's always nice to interact with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Before I sign off, like the video, subscribe. If you can, do support us with the QR code right here. You can become a member or send us a super sticker, super chat. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.